Hello there, greetings. I'm Jamie Mitchell and it's great to have your company for another bumper episode of the Armchair Fan Podcast. Australian distance runner Cara Feain-Ryan is today's special guest, and after hearing this episode, she might just inspire you to pull on your joggers and go for a run. Cara's a speech pathology student here at UQ, and she's fast becoming one of the nation's premier long-distance runners. Stacks of fascinating training and competition insights coming up. You might even learn a thing or two on how to improve your park run time. Let's rip in, shall we? Cara Feain-Ryan on the Armchair Fan Podcast. Hello, Cara. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me, Jamie. It's great to be here.
I am very interested in how you do all you do every day of the week and fit in so much running and compete. And I go for a little 5K run and I'm hurting for days. So I want you, if you can, to put me in the mind of when you're competing and heading into a major event. Talk to me about the days leading up and those moments before the starting gun goes in. What happens?
So I think for runners, we like consistency. We like having the same sort of routine and that sort of thing. So in the days leading up to a comp, we still turn up to training. We still go for our easy runs. A lot of the time, you'll just reduce maybe the intensity and the amount that you do, but you're still doing very similar work to what you do week in, week out. And then when you sort of get to that competition day, you go through a reduced warm-up, so to get the body moving and that sort of thing. A lot of us will go for like 10 to 20-minute jogs.
Before you run?
Yeah, before we run. So this is like probably an hour before we run, before we go to like the call room and that sort of thing, go out to the warm-up track, do a 20-minute jog, some light stretches, some drills.
How light is that warm-up jog?
For us, it's at talking pace.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. So definitely nothing high intensity. The heart rate's still pretty low.
Okay, so you're heading to the marshalling zone. Are you whacking on the Beats headphones? I mean, what do you do in your little preparation there?
Sometimes I never do the same thing twice. Sometimes if it's like a bigger national comp and I don't have anyone to warm up with, I'll have the headphones in with some music. But if I have a teammate that I'm in the race with, I'll often just be chatting to them and warming up with them and that sort of thing.
So it's not so much a close off the world preparation. I need my focus. I'm visualising. It's more chat, relax, try and keep it pretty chilled environment, is it?
Definitely, because it's all about not using up your energy before you get on that starting line and just keeping yourself as calm as possible. Obviously, like I definitely have a lot of sort of pump up thoughts for myself and I'm thinking about the race in the background, but I try not to make it the focus until I get on the track.
Do you get nervous in the moments before a gun goes off?
Definitely. I think it's that anticipation for when the gun goes off. Everything goes quiet and you're just trying to will yourself, get yourself ready to go and that sort of thing.
When you're out there, where do you go to mentally? Are you talking to yourself continually? Are you singing a song? Or do you just shut off completely? What happens in your brain?
I definitely talk to myself. It's quite funny. I actually have a really hard time remembering what I tell myself during a race, especially in those bigger races where maybe I run a PB or get a really good result. But I know that it's similar to training where you're just trying to stay really relaxed as possible. And so that's just saying, this doesn't hurt too much, you know how to do this. And then as the race goes on further, you're just getting yourself pumped up for that final lap or the final kick to try and get yourself to the finish.
Yeah, so what happens when it does get hard? I find when I do park runs, about the 3K mark, I start to struggle, my mind wanders, I feel sore. But for you, when you do noticeably feel off, how do you combat that?
Little things like little mantras you can say to yourself, something that can get you back in the mindset that you need to be in, focusing on certain aspects of technique like driving the arms or just staying relaxed and taking some deep breaths as well, because breathing can be something that when you start to get stressed that can get out of control. So bringing that back and just trying to focus on deep breath in, deep breath out, and trying to be kind to yourself in those moments too, because it doesn't always go well and you do have hard moments, but the sign of any good athlete is trying to still push through that. Yeah.
I've got a million race tactic questions for you, but specifically let's talk about the events that you do because it's a bit of a smorgasbord really. It's kind of short. Well, not so much short. You are a middle distance runner, but your events vary from, say, a 2-minute race to like a 40-minute race. What do you compete in?
So I compete in mainly the 1,500 metres, 3K steeplechase, 5K and 10K. But I also occasionally run 800s, but not as much anymore, so that's that 2-minute race. And in terms of that, my favourite ones would probably be the 3K steeple and the 5K at the moment.
And also a bit of cross-country as well thrown in.
Yes, yeah. So cross-country is in our sort of winter off-season almost, so it's when track and field isn't happening. We do a bit of cross-country as middle distance runners as sort of base fitness and just something different.
So I'm interested in race tempo and adjusting speeds to suit what's going on out there. Now, how do you like to run? Are you a pack leader? Do you like to fall in line? And do you make many calculations on the fly depending on how fast or slow the race is?
Definitely. So that's a big one in middle distance races because you can end up in races that start really slow and then that becomes a really tactical race because everyone's sort of feeling really good and comfortable. So it all comes down to that final sprint and you have to get yourself in the best position possible. Or there are other races where it starts really fast and then you're just trying to hold on the best you can and just try and be there in the last lap as well.
What about when you're leading? How much of it goes into watching your back and seeing where you're at? I assume it must be very difficult to continually set the pace because you've always got someone watching and following. Is that kind of how it is if you do lead?
Definitely. Leading can be a good thing if you pull it off, but a lot of the time you have a big target on your back. So you have to be pretty confident if you do lead from the front that you know the pace and that you know you can hold on to it. There have definitely been races where I've had to set the pace because I know that that's the best opportunity I have to run a fast time or to win. And in terms of turning around and looking back, my coach always says never turn around. It's the worst thing you can do because it's basically a sign of weakness if you're trying to check who's behind you and how close they are. So if you're on the front, you've got to be confident and just look ahead.
So if that is an instruction from the coach not to look back and you do get, pegged by someone, is it just bad luck that they just got their run better? How does that work? Because I've seen a few races where, they think they're home and someone will just sneak up. Is it just a matter of bad luck in those cases?
Absolutely, yeah. Some people just on different days will have really good kick downs, we call them. So that last 100 metres, it can be brutal because some people come from more of a fast speed background and they'll have better kicks at the end. Whereas some people like me, I'm a bit more of a longer distance runner that it takes me a little while to get going. So it can be quite disappointing if people do come past you. But if you are in front, obviously you do have some confidence with you as well that you're doing well. So sometimes you can find that little bit left to try and get across the line, but it's hard.
Do you sometimes get a bit panicked if you are too far off the pace? So you mentioned it might take a little while to build up. Does that ever factor in that, I'm a little too far back here, I need to lift it up?
Definitely, and that's where you've got to trust in your training that when you're in a race, you can be in the race, and so you have to do everything you can to get back to that front group. That's always the main aim, and that's what we train for, and that's what our coach does to try and prepare us best for that. So definitely it's a mental game as well out there as a physical one.
Yeah. Do you try and conserve your energy for a big kick at the end, or is it more about keeping a consistent pace throughout and then just kick with whatever you've got left?
Definitely more the second option. So I definitely do better if I've had I still go fast at the start, and then you just got to find something left in that last whatever the race is, whether it's a K left in a 10K or 400 left in a steeple or a 1500, and that's what we train for because that's why we do so many kilometres every week so that we still have that little fitness left at the end.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So steeple, you mentioned it a few times. It's a favourite event of yours. To me, as a limited watcher of athletics, it seems a bonkers event, jumping into a pit of water. Seems pretty dangerous to me, doing that. Can you talk to me about when you're in a pack and you're actually leaping into a pit of water? I mean, what happens? How do you do it safely?
It is definitely one of the more dangerous aspects of athletics, I suppose you could say, because you can have some pretty big falls and injuries and that sort of thing because they are giant wooden steeples. They're not like hurdles where you can knock them over and keep going. If you hit a steeple, it's very bad news. So when you're in a pack, you have to be really aware the whole time, which ironically, it's very hard on a steeple because you get very fatigued by the end, but you still need to be aware of what you're doing and where you're jumping and your foot placement and that kind of thing, because you don't want to slip up and have something go wrong. And yeah, those water jumps notoriously, especially the first one, everyone's a bit jumpy, a bit nervous because they've just started the race, and there can be collisions and that sort of thing, and you have to be really aware of what's going on.
Have you had many nasty tumbles in that environment?
No, touch wood, I've actually been okay. I'm pretty lucky that I'm quite tall for my event, especially compared to the other girls, so I never have too many troubles getting in and out of the water jump. But I've witnessed some where people have clipped hurdles or other people have knocked into them, and you just kind of fall into the water, and it can be pretty disappointing.
This might be a completely stupid question, but again, it's from a novice. What happens when you're running with wet shoes? Is it an inconvenience, and do you have to change your technique?
So the only difference I have with steeple races in terms of my shoes is I don't wear socks in steeple, so that's a pretty common thing that most people will do. It is a little bit annoying, and sometimes you might notice it, but a lot of the time, because you're racing and you sort of focus on so many other things, you don't even notice it. So your shoes might be wet, but the spikes that we wear are designed to be a bit wet, so you don't even notice it.
What do you like so much about that event? Is it just the uniqueness of it?
Definitely the uniqueness, and it's very challenging. And then also with that, it's a bit of fun as well, because as runners, we do the same thing over and over again, week in, week out, and steeple, you go over barriers and hurdles every lap, so it's a whole different kind of racing, and I think I've always enjoyed that.
You touched on it briefly when you talked about thinking about your arm movement in a race, but for people listening at home who might want to pick up some running tips, what's key to a good running technique and keeping it consistent over a duration of a race, or just a little jog around the burbs? What's the trick to a good running style?
Definitely, I think a good running style can often start with the right equipment. So I'm a big advocate for having the right shoes when you run too. So it all starts at your feet, and just making sure that your arms are nice and relaxed when you're running and you aren't breathing too heavily. So sometimes people can have issues with their breathing, but I don't know, it's always come so naturally to me. I never think about it too much, but I think so long as you have the right shoes on and you feel ready for a run and you're not trying to go too hard at the start, I think that's the biggest mistake people can make, starting too fast and then you run out of steam by the end, and it can feel really challenging.
Yeah. Before we go into the training workload, because I'm very fascinated how you get so much running done, but can you talk to me about competing at cross-country level? So where does it fit into your regime of competing? Is it something you do on the side? Is it a main focus of you? And what's it actually like when you change from the track to, all terrain?
So I've always done cross-country. It starts back at school level. So it was actually where I first got introduced to running. So back in, very little primary school, obviously everyone jumps in and does cross-country, and I've just done it every year since then. So there's always, from school level, you then progress to your districts and your states and your nationals and that sort of thing, and that's just continued ever since I finished school as well. So we do cross-country from about May till August in Australia. So it's in between our track season. And for us, it means a little bit of longer running, it's not as high intensity, so it's less intensity and longer running. So in terms of preparing for the terrain, sometimes we do extra hill reps and that sort of thing, but a lot of it doesn't change. It's just when you turn up to race, obviously you're looking at a mountain or a big grass field rather than a track.
What shoes do you wear?
For cross country, usually I wear either cross country spikes or just flats. Yep. So they're more like road running shoes.
Yeah.
So they have to have a bit of extra cushioning because it is a longer event.
You've done obviously a full gamut of events, and there's cross country, there's track, but also street races as well. Do you enjoy that environment?
I do enjoy the street racing. It's always hard to fit it in amongst every single other racing that we do, but it's always a lot of fun, and especially for the longer 5K, 10K, since I've been getting into them more, I enjoy the road races a lot more. When you're younger, they're very tough races because they feel like they go on forever, but the more running I've done, the better the more I've enjoyed them.
What's the wear and tear like after a street race?
definitely worse than like a track race because it is that hard concrete. But a lot of the time, if we're in the right shoes, that shouldn't be too much of an issue with recovery.
Let's talk about training. You're running all the time. How many sessions a week are you running? And just roughly, how many Ks a day would you cover when you're sort of in flight for a full competition?
Yeah, so each day sort of varies a little bit, but I'll run through it probably makes sense if I run through from the start to the end of the week. So typically on a Monday, I run for an hour, which is usually 12 or 13K. And then on a Tuesday, I have a track session, which is usually a little bit more, so 14 or 15 kilometres. And then Wednesday, it's another easy run, so 13K.
So Monday and Wednesdays, are they just running around the suburbs of your house?
Yeah, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday are just easy runs.
Is it to get out of the track environment, or is it just access to venues that just works easier to go for a run nearby?
So it's more about the fact that we, as runners, when we do our hard track sessions, we need time to recover, and our easy days of running are great for our aerobic fitness. So that's that fitness that just helps us be able to run for long distances. So it is a second part of our training, and it's important because it is tough, like, to run for that long, and it takes a long time to build up to it. But it's enjoyable because you can do it socially with friends as well, so it's not as intense.
I was going to ask how intense it is, or do you try and avoid headphones, for instance, because it isn't part of competition, or do you actually like whipping on the music and having a run?
Yeah, if I'm by myself, I'll throw the music in and just go for a run. But often I'll try and find other people to run with, and it's just at that sort of conversation pace. So always you should be able to talk to other people, and it should never be too high intensity on those days. What
about a difference in training for, say, an 800 metre race compared to a 10K? Completely different distances, times. How does that training vary when you head into a competition?
Definitely. So those main track sessions we do, so my coach is in charge of planning all of our sessions, and in 10K prep time, it's a lot of longer stuff. So all of our main sets will be a lot more, they won't be as high intensity. It'll be longer reps with not as much rest, whereas training for 800s, you do a lot shorter reps with bigger rest. So it's a lot faster. So it's that speed work rather than that long distance work.
Do you have a particular favourite training drill or a bit of a routine that you run through?
Yeah, so we have a pretty standard one with my group where we go for our easy jog, that conversation, chatting pace. Then we do some stretches, light stretches, some drills as well for sort of technique stuff, and then a few faster run-throughs, we call them.
Yep.
So it's like 60 metres to 100 metres, and you just sort of run.
So in terms of warming up and warming down, so obviously there's a lot of actual running involved before and after, but what about the other stuff that, foam rolling, for instance? I assume you're absolutely ripping those, and also just stretching. How much time do you spend doing that?
I definitely should spend more time on it. It's one of those things that you always get told to do, but sometimes it does get dropped off. But every day I try and roll, like do some foam rolling for at least 5 minutes and stretch for sort of 10, 15 minutes if I can, if I have the time. I really enjoy yoga as well. Something like that's really good for stretching as well. In terms of like right before a race, we more focus on the running. So any of that stretching, foam rolling, for us is done at home the night before, the morning of, never really at the track. It's not the biggest focus, but always making sure that our bodies are recovered and whatever we need to do to get them recovered and ready. That's sort of our responsibility.
So Joe Public, myself included, our quads are burning and they're hurting for a few days after a run. Do you feel that when you go for a run for an hour, or are you just blessed that your body can absorb that kind of punishment? Oh, not so much punishment, but do you know what I mean? Mm. Are you sore most days?
Not most days, definitely not. I couldn't do what I do if I was, but I definitely get sore sometimes. So after a really big session or after track races especially, I might pull up a little bit sore. And on those days, I still will often run the next day, but it just has to be at a slower pace, and I have to put more onus on myself to do my stretching and my rolling and that sort of thing. But the biggest thing with running is it takes time. It feels terrible at first, and I've spoken to a lot of new runners who, when they first get into it, it's really hard and they get that soreness the next day. You know, you can't feel like you breathe properly, but the longer you do it, the easier it gets. It's one of those catch-22s.
Can you talk to me about recovery? Is it a regimented thing where you have set rest days, or do you just factor in recovery and rest days when you know your body needs a rest? How does it work, or is it a bit of both?
So it's definitely more when I feel I need a rest day. In terms of, at the moment, I run usually 7 days a week, but if I ever feel overtired or like my body's not recovering, my coach is always happy for me to take a day off where I need it. He's never going to be one to push me to do more than I should, but I'm pretty good at listening to my body and when it needs recovery. It's definitely something you have to learn as an athlete, because it can be really tough, because you just want to keep training and you want to keep doing more, but there are times where you have to pull back. So definitely listening to your own body is an important skill.
How much time will you take off training? As much as you need, or will you try and get back on the horse after a day or so?
Usually after a day or so. I've had bigger injuries where it takes a lot longer, so I know that if you push it too much, you can end up having big time off. But during a year, we normally have 1 or 2 weeks off at different periods to try and just have it completely off running, and then we build back into it. So that's kind of our biggest rest points. But each week, 1 day or 2 days, it's not going to hurt.
Hey, will you give yourself Christmas Day off from running?
It depends. Sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. I never put too much emphasis on it. It's, if I feel like going for a little jog, I might. But if it's at that time of year where I just don't feel like it, I won't.
How important is diet in training as well and preparation? And also stuff like, gels and things like that. Do you dabble with that before a competition, but specifically around diet? I mean, how big a part is it?
Yeah, diet is a huge part of it, especially being a female athlete as well. There's another aspect to it. But I've always been really blessed to have been brought up in a family where, healthy food's always been a priority, and, you touch all your food groups every day, fruit and veg and meats. And so long as you're doing all the right things, you can have junk food in moderation and things you enjoy in moderation, so long as you're hitting all those main food groups and making sure you're eating enough and at the right time. So like straight after a training session, I always have, something to eat or drink to get that energy back in again. And that's really important. And then just day to day, making sure you're eating well enough so you never feel tired.
Is a big bowl of pasta still a thing? I remember when I was in primary school, it was like, we're going across country, nail some penne beforehand.
Yeah, pasta makes you faster. That's still the verdict out there, I think. Everyone's different, but I love pasta, so I'll enjoy some Italian, food the night before a race.
Can you talk to me about the athlete-coach relationship? So your coach, how long have you been working with them? But also, what's the feedback like, and how do you chat with each other and improvements in your running?
Yeah, so I've been with my current coach for about 5 years since I moved up to Brisbane, and that's quite a while, and we have a really good relationship where obviously we talk at training each week, but we'll also talk on the phone if we ever need to chat about things, and we sit down at the start of a season and map out what our plan is, what races we want to target, and yeah, he's definitely been a big factor in where I am now, so that good communication is key. I'm also talking about when it's a bad day at the track, you haven't had the result you wanted. How forthright is the conversation? How honest does the feedback get between the two of you? What's that like when it's a difficult race to analyse? Yeah, I'm a pretty harsh critic on myself, so we'll always have pretty honest conversations if I felt that I didn't do something right in the race, that I didn't execute it. He'll always let me know that, and yeah, it can be a pretty tough conversation sometimes, and there are those disappointing races, but we always end the conversation with deciding on what we need to do to improve and to be better. So I think that's important.
Do you have an athletics hero or a mentor that you look up to?
I've never really had one specific person. In terms of steeplechase, there's a few athletes that I look up to, like Genevieve Lacaze in Australia. She's our current steeplechase record holder. There's an American steeplechaser, Emma Coburn, that's really amazing at what she does as well. She's an Olympic medalist. So there's people like that I, of course, look up to, but I don't really have like an idol per se, but I'm inspired by the people around me as well.
Cara, I was doing a bit of research. It's not stalking, but I looked through your Instagram feed and there's a lovely photo from 2016. Now, I think it's you in front of your house. You're in your Australian kit. The caption reads, "You know it's finally real when you get the uniform." I'm guessing that is the first time you put on your Australian kit.
Yes, it absolutely was. So that day when it arrived in the mail was a very exciting day. I had been selected on the team a few months prior and it was a very exciting moment. So that was for the Melanesian Athletics Championships. So it was just a local international meet and it was a very exciting moment.
What's happening in that photo? Is mum or dad taking the picture?
Yep, so mum was there taking it for me. When I got it, I had to put it on because it was very, very exciting. You always look at other people wearing it and you just want it to be you. So it was an awesome.
Are you an emotional type when it comes to that sort of representative honours?
Emotional with happiness and with joy, I think, would be the biggest one. That year, I'd had quite a bit of success and it was just felt like it had all been worth it for that moment.
What was the athletics journey up until that point? I'm guessing mum and dad are cruising around, taking you to competitions all the time, a lot of training. Did you start very young in life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started training probably properly when I was 12 or 13, but I never took it too seriously. I just did it for fun and mum was always my biggest support and she drove me around to every training. We were flying here, there and everywhere all over Australia for different competitions and we both really enjoyed it. And then obviously in the last couple of years of high school, got a bit more serious about it. I actually moved to Brisbane with mum and that was when I had my success with a couple of national titles and then also making that Australian team.
Do you keep your Aussie uniform within sight just to look at it for a bit of motivation, anything like that?
Yeah, I have a little tub that just has all my past uniforms in it. So it's in there in amongst, the youngest primary school state team
cool.
Uniform I made all the way up until that one.
If you can pinpoint it, what's been the biggest moment of your athletics career so far?
I think probably two. When I won my national title in grade 12 for steeplechase, that was a really big one. I'd never won a title before at nationals and it was a very exciting moment, and especially to have happened for that last year of school. At that point, a lot of people start to quit the sport, but it really inspired me to keep going. And then this year, making my second Australian team was a really big moment too.
So let's talk about that. So it's been a strange year for everyone and athletics has certainly felt the full brunt of COVID, unfortunately. So you started the year with some terrific success. So at the Queensland Athletics Championships, you won the Women's Open 1500 metre race. You also won the Women's Open 3000 metre steeplechase. And at the Queensland Cross Country Championships, a fourth place in the Women's 10K. So really good results. That leads to you getting selected to represent Australia at the World University Cross Country Championships in Morocco. There was also some UQ athletes heading with you as well. So Samantha Phillips, who's also a Clem Jones Sporting Scholarship recipient. We'll talk about that in a moment. Lily Dalton from UQ is also on the squad. And then it gets cancelled pretty late in the game. What happened with all that sort of situation? It must have been the heights and lows, I guess, all at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was so exciting to be in the team. We'd collected our uniforms. Everything was set to go. It was 2 days before we were meant to get on the plane that we got an email and a text message to say the whole event had been cancelled the following week. So it was hugely disappointing. It was obviously can't be helped. It was completely outside our control. But I rationalised it by just being selected in the team was a huge thing for me, and that was enough at that point.
What were you hoping to achieve had the event taken place?
I think the biggest thing about world competitions is, and especially at my age, I was just there for the experience. I hadn't placed any big expectations on what I'd do. I just wanted to be there and have the opportunity. So I think because of that, with big, international competitions, it's more about getting there. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the first step. So that's what I took away from it.
What about the Queensland State Championship results? So a couple of wins. Reflecting on those achievements, were you delighted with your performances from that competition?
Yeah, definitely delighted with my performances. And at that point too, we actually thought Nationals athletics would go ahead in a few weeks. So that was definitely disappointing as well to have that cancelled. So lots of things got cancelled like it did for everyone. But I've held on to those results and I'm glad I got them because it's definitely kept me going and kept me motivated throughout this year.
And you've certainly been building towards that selection. Some great results last year, 5th in the Women's Open 3K steeplechase at the Australian titles, a couple of 4th place finishes at the Queensland State Cross Country Championships and the 10K Women's Open, also the Queensland 10K Road Running Championships, a 4th place there. If you can, I guess, put it into words, where have been the biggest improvements in your running in the last few years? Where have you made the biggest inroads?
Definitely just consistency and staying uninjured. So when I came out of school, I had a couple of injuries that set me back for a while. And then just within the last 12, 18 months, I've been very uninjured and just been able to consistently train and gradually build up how many kilometres I do every week, and definitely that's been the biggest credit. And also a lot of self-belief, I think, and confidence in myself that I could run that well.
So it sounds like you've taken the Moroccan cancellation in your stride. There's nothing you can do about it. It was disappointing. But how has this year been, though? Events have stopped, training's been difficult. Has it been a really tough year for you to navigate, or conversely, some people have found it actually quite nice to just pull back from their sport? Whereabouts are you in that sort of continuum?
Yeah, of course it's disappointing not to have competition, but in terms of training, I think this has been a great year. I'm very lucky with the team and the group that I train with that we've all kept each other accountable and motivated, and I haven't really struggled at any point to keep running because I really enjoy it. And I think this year probably reaffirmed that for me, that I really do enjoy it, and it's important for me to balance out study and everything else that I do.
Now, assuming things get back to normal and competitions come back and we can go running again as normal, what are you hoping to achieve next year?
Definitely at the moment, the focus is hopefully for some kind of national championships in March next year. So just building towards that. There's a few competitions already coming back. So just racing track races, seeing how much I can improve and cut down on my times.
And do you settle down around the sort of Christmas break? How does all that work? I mean, athletic season's still going. What happens?
Yeah.
Do you allow yourself to have a bit of a relax over that time?
Yeah, it's tough because it's normally the big holidays, but at that point, that's our biggest lead up to nationals and states and that sort of thing. So I'll have obviously a couple of days off in there for Christmas, maybe for New Year's, but it's training as usual normally. Yep.
I want to close today just by reflecting on your time here at UQ with your studies. And I do want to point out that last year received a UQ Half Blue for athletics, so congratulations for that. I actually went to have a look at the archive to see how many athletics recipients had received medals. There's too many to count over the 100 plus years. So too many people to name. I mean, some recent ones that have received honours, Dane Bird-Smith, Caitlin Sargent-Jones as well. So you're in good company there. I mentioned alongside Sam Phillips, you're a Clem Jones Sporting Scholarship recipient. This year, quite special that your scholarship was awarded in honour of the late Kim Gurin. Now, I know you didn't meet Kim, but Kim served at UQ Sport as our Executive Director from 2002 to 2011. She was also a Unisport Australia board member from 2010 to 2016, and she played a major part in developing the UQ Sporting Scholarship Program. So I do want to ask how scholarships have helped you to actually balance athletics and study, but particularly this honour that's been linked to Kim. I know you didn't meet her, but upon hearing that, how did that sit with you to have that honour bestowed upon you?
Oh, I was definitely, I was very humbled by it when I found out. You know, I was very overjoyed to have been awarded the scholarship this year, and to find out it had that attachment to it as well was really special. It just is a huge honour, definitely.
How important is your scholarship to actually keeping this dream alive of competing?
It's huge. Athletics typically doesn't have a lot of pathways and a lot of teams like some other sports do. There's not as much development and transition from junior to senior athletics. So to have the help from UQ and the support from UQ, it's been an amazing opportunity for me and kept the dream alive, definitely.
And Of course, our scholarship recipients get access to a number of resources and support networks as well to help with the dual careers. What have you found most beneficial in studying at UQ that you've lent on to get through it?
It's definitely made that transition from school to uni easier. So whether that's I've accessed tutoring or just being able to access all the sport facilities here makes balancing uni and sport that much easier. But just knowing that there's always someone to ask if I need help is really, really helpful.
What drew you to UQ to study?
When I moved to Brisbane, I did a bit of training out here and I loved the grounds and everything that was here, and that drew me initially, and then obviously just looking into all the programs, and when I found what I wanted to do, just thought it all worked. It all fell into place.
So Bachelor of Speech Pathology honours degree. Tell me about that. How did that find you, and why did you want to get into that degree?
Yeah, so I did find speech pathology before I finished school, but didn't get into it initially, so did another degree just to transfer over just for a year. But then I fell in love with speech pathology because, we help people communicate, which is, we're communicating right now. It's such something that we take for granted every day, and there's so many people out there that don't have the same opportunities, and just being able to help them is huge.
How hands-on's the degree? I assume you're out dabbling a lot with people, and it's very, cut and thrust with actually doing the training, in person.
Yeah, obviously COVID's thrown a spanner in the works with that one.
Yeah,
so
true.
The first couple of years of the degree, which is what I'm in just finishing up now, is a lot more theory-based, just knowledge-based. So I haven't had a huge opportunity to interact with people yet. We've done a little bit of stuff that's very hands-on, but the more hands-on stuff will come next year. So I'm looking forward to it.
A particular field you'd like to move into when you do?
No, very open-minded at the moment. So I'll just see what I like when I go on placements and that sort of thing.
Go with the flow.
Yeah,
a bit like
definitely.
the athletics calendar, we don't know where it's going.
Exactly. Got to be flexible. We've learned about flexibility and adaptability this year.
Well, it's been wonderful to chat to you. Thank you for your time. I'm going to stick to my running a bit. I get a bit lethargic with it sometimes, but maybe I just need to find someone to chat with.
Definitely. Yeah, find people to hold you accountable.
Good on you. Hope next year is huge for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Some great stuff there from Cara. We appreciate her dropping by for a chat. And if you're enjoying the pod, please tell a mate. We appreciate the love. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. That way you'll receive each new episode as soon as it drops. That's it for today. Production magic by Ashley Hanger. I'm Jamie Mitchell saying catch you next time on the Armchair Fan Podcast.